This God is a shorthand for our Creator, our source, the beginning, the all of it, all of it. God, Spirit, you name it, George. Whatever you want to call it, I call it God, I call it Spirit, I call it source at its absolute essence. And that is all there is. Source became this. Source is becoming everything we can conceive of. And beyond that, into things we can't even conceive of. It's all of Source. Source is all there is. There's no spot where it is not. There's no spot where God is not. There's no spot where Spirit is not. It's all of that. It's all one thing. One very, very complicated and simple thing. And because that's all there is, it is all good. It is all peace. It is all grace. It is all wisdom, all prosperity and abundance, all wealth and health. It's all of it. And it's evolving all the time as each of us are born into that ofness. I am of that. You are of that. We are all of that. Health, wealth, wisdom, grace, you name it. It is what we are of, made of, consist of, express as. So it's easy to be most of the time. Today I am so grateful to know that it is easy to be all of that here. In this community, in this connection, where I get to know that each of the people I see in this room and each of the people I feel connected to in the world are aspects of the one. Wondrous and amazing. Moving towards good, or more good, or gooderer. Sorry, had to do that. It is a movement towards greater. I see it as a spiral going up and up. Nothing repeated, always forward, upward movement toward greater and greater good. Even in those moments when it doesn't feel like that, there's a way to see it that is good. So I choose to see the good. I choose to know the good, because when I see it and know it, it comes. Because my consciousness calls it forth. Each of us has that capacity. Today I know huge connection, lots of love, ease and grace, wisdom, and openness to experiencing more wisdom, not just knowing it's in the room, but allowing it in to myself. Growing in capacity for more and more love. I celebrate this. I am deeply passionate about it and deeply grateful for it. So I'm going to let my words go now into that law that takes it from a thought to a thing. Not my job. God's job. And in releasing it, I let it go and say, and so it is.
We're looking at a year-long theme of a grand rising, which is a rising in consciousness. How big can we go? How expansive can we go? And for this month, we're looking at moving from good to great to grand. Yes? From good to great to grand. And so today, we're going to start that journey with the inner journey. That's our talk title, The Inner Journey. So let's first explore this good, great, grand idea, okay? If one has been sick or one has been poor, not sick is good, right? Not poor is good, yes? Okay? And that's where many people stop. I get to not sick, that's good enough, I'm right here. I used to go hiking up in the Cascades when I lived in Seattle, and there was a trail that I went up that I knew I had heard had a beautiful alpine lake up at the top of the trail. And I would go hiking, and I would get about 4 miles into the 7-mile trail, find a place and there was a pretty good climb to get to that point, find a place that overlooked a beautiful waterfall, stop for lunch, relax and say, this is good enough. And after a while, turn around and go back down. And it took a number of times before I finally said, you know what, I wonder what's beyond this, here for the next 3 miles. And I finally went up. And interestingly, I found that once I got up a little bit farther, the grade lessened. It was beautiful, it was easy, and I got to the alpine lake. So a lot of times we stop at good enough. Yes? But there's an old saying that says, don't let good be the enemy of better. Not sick is certainly better than sick, but it's not radiant, vibrant health. Yes? Not poor is certainly better than poor, but it's not fabulous, wonderful wealth. In whatever way we want that wealth. It doesn't just have to be money. If we're willing to go a few more steps forward, great health, great good, whatever form it is available. And often in life, just a few more steps beyond a good life is a great life, something more expansive. But our own stuff gets in the way of taking that step, yes? Our I don't know how, or I don't deserve it, or I'm not good enough, or I shouldn't want it because others don't have it, or it'll be so much more work to go any further. That was my little mantra on that trail. And on and on and on, we have these excuses, we have this chatter, but if we really believe, if we really know that we are the infinite in form, which is what we teach, you and I are that infinite presence, individualized in form, yes? Breathe that in for a moment. Recognize that. If we really get that, see, the infinite doesn't seem to settle for just enough, does it? You look at the abundance of stars. There's not just barely enough stars or whatever. There's not just barely enough water on the planet. There's not just barely enough, a couple of animals, a few humans, in this vast, flat Earth sphere. There's abundance. There's opulence. There's magnificence. There's a whole lot. So the infinite expresses itself grandly, expansively. And so can we if we get our bloated nothingness out of the way of the flow of the divine circuits, as Emerson so wonderfully said. But I also want to look at this idea of moving from good to great to grand, not from the American capitalistic, consumeristic, if some is good, more is better, bigger, better, what, more stuff. I wanted to look at, I couldn't remember whether a grande was bigger than a venti or vice versa, right? So I went and looked that up online. And first of all, I found out that, and I remembered Starbucks used to have a short. And they finally eliminated that. Your smallest drink is now a tall. And then it goes to a grande. And then it goes to a venti. And then it goes to a Trenta. Trenta stands for 30. Venti is 20. In cars, you know, if an SUV is good, a larger SUV is better, and a much bigger SUV is still better to the point that you can't really even drive it in town. You can't park it anywhere. Yes? You know, Chrysler used to have their Caravan, and then they expanded it to the Grand Caravan. So let's explore the good to great to grand idea from a more spiritual perspective, minus the bloatware. Take a breath. So first, good. Good. Good is one of the challenges that many people have when they first encounter our teaching, when we say that God or Spirit is good. Yes? And what happens is this list comes up, this litany of all the not good things of the world, the not good things of our life, believing them to be an expression of God's nature instead of expressions of our nature. And confusing things that I like or dislike as cosmic good or bad. Yes? I used to give the example, you know, people would say, well, how could God let this happen? And I say, that's like asking, how could gravity let something happen? It just works a certain way. Yeah? And so I gave the example of you could take, this is a few years ago, you could take the Dalai Lama and Osama bin Laden and take them both up to the top of the Empire State Building and push them off. And gravity would not look at the Dalai Lama and said, you're a horrible person who's kept your people in the Middle Ages for centuries, and go splat, and then look at Osama bin Laden and go, you're a wonderful, good freedom fighter supporting your people, and I'm just going to let you fall gently to the ground and land. Now that does two things, right? Number one, it gets how gravity works. Number two, it gets how we judge other people or other things as good, but other cultures may not see them the same way, yes? There are certain cultures that view the Dalai Lama as not a good person. Chinese government? Yeah. There are certain cultures that viewed Osama bin Laden as a wonderful freedom fighter. Yes? Okay. Which tells us the good, bad, in the way that we assess it, is a personal assessment. It's not a cosmic, there is a good that everybody and everything agrees on. So we confuse things that I like and things that I dislike as good and bad, being unaware that so much of what we label as good or bad, right or wrong, is based on our conditioning and the culture in which we live. It might be more accurate to say God is goodness itself, moving out of being limited to the forms we associate with good and recognizing that we wouldn't even be able to recognize good if there wasn't something, we wouldn't be able to label things good, bad, if there wasn't some deeper sense of a good that exists within the universe that's within us. Now, we might disagree about the form that it takes, just like we might disagree of what beauty is, yes? Okay? But we recognize that there is beauty. My interpretation of beauty might be rap music really loud. Somebody else's might be, it's not. Somebody else's, more like mine, would be Claude Debussy's Image. You know, classical music playing wonderfully well. But beauty exists apart from any form. So good or goodness exists apart from any form. This morning's meditation from Mark Nepo talks about that water is clear. Most people think it has a color. Many people think it has a color, but it's clear. It reflects anything and everything around it. Yes? It takes on the image, but it doesn't change the nature of what water is. It doesn't change the water's clarity. So we can have all sorts of stuff experiencing in our lives, and we're projecting it onto this thing that we call God, this image that we made up in our own image and likeness, yes? Okay. And say, oh, it's good, it's bad, but what we're seeing is simply a reflection of ourselves, our own mind. Take a breath. So we also say that God is great, or perhaps greatness itself expressing through form. an example of that is you can kill off a great person or destroy a great work of art, but greatness itself still exists, yes? Okay. So, wonderful lesson on philosophy, right? What the heck does all this have to do with my life? Let's play with that. So our culture, our domestication, to use Don Miguel Ruiz's word, tells us that moving from good to great to grand is an external journey of adding more stuff. Yes? Do more things out there. It's externally focused. But when we understand that we already are and always have been expressions of the infinite presence that already is good and great and grand, or goodness and greatness and grandness, if you will, we recognize that the journey we are on is one to uncover who we already are, but have forgotten or been hypnotized out of believing. We've been conditioned away from that. So the journey isn't about becoming something more. The journey is about unbecoming everything that isn't our true nature. Yeah? Breathe. Are you with me? Okay. The journey is about becoming everything that isn't really you or me. So we discover rather than become our original divine self. We already are that. We just forget it. Well, anyways, I do. I can't vouch for you. You might all know it right away and you're living from it completely, but I forget sometimes. As we take this journey, we uncover our own unique layers of goodness, greatness, and grandness. And again, not as something to become, to add on, but something to become aware of, to uncover that already exists, to reveal what already exists. But we must first know who we really are. We must first really recognize, I am already good. I am already great. I am already grande, grand. Heck, I'm already Trenta. I'm already supersized, to use the song. That all exists within me. See, if we don't know that we are infinite goodness personified, we won't live from that, and then we'll always feel separate from our good, always trying to find it out there somewhere, somehow. Ernest Holmes reminds us that we don't get or experience what we wish or what we want. We experience what we believe we are. And what we see in our lives showing up is simply the reflection of or the expression of our past and current consciousness, which is not something to beat yourself up over, by the way. It's just information. Oh, if that mess showed up, that must be what I'm thinking in my consciousness. I can change my consciousness. That's why I call the good news, bad news of this teaching. This stuff that's out here, I co-created, but I can create something different. I can change. So many of us who have been in this kind of teaching for a while can say, I am good, without too much discomfort, yes? Though we may not fully believe it yet, because our conditioned intellect jumps in with its list, right? Its endless list of, well, what about this and what about that? What about those extra pounds? What about your how you treated your kids? What about your money? What about your parents? What about? On and on and on. Anybody's mind besides mine? Go on to that chatter? Yes? Okay. As base as we said on conditioned ideas of good, bad, and externally focused. If we want to move beyond good, i.e. not sick, we need to uncover our already existing layer of greatness. So I'm going to invite you to put this into practice a little bit, to turn to somebody near you and say with feeling, I am the embodiment of greatness. I am the embodiment of greatness. Notice how that feels. Notice perhaps what your intellect did with that. Did it chatter back at you a little bit? No. Some said yes, some said no. Just Don't beat yourself up. Just notice if it shattered. Take a breath. Breathe that in. I am the embodiment of greatness. Now, are you willing to take it one more step? I am grandness embodied. Say that to that same person. I am grandness embodied. And feel it. Breathe that in and feel it. So here's something to contemplate. This is part of your spiritual practice for this coming week. What does your great life, what does your grand life feel like, look like? If you truly believe that you are greatness embodied, how would that be? How would that show up in your life? And are you willing to say yes and let that flow? What is your grand life? Heck, what does your Trenta life look like and feel like? And just, so that's part of what I want to invite you to do this week is contemplate that. What is the greatness that wants to express through me? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Who am I as I express this greatness? I'm going to invite you to recognize that you probably already are doing this in some places in your life, yes? Okay? And so allow it to come into other places of your life where maybe you're not quite feeling it so much, so it starts to become a more expanded experience of your life. And so the question is, will you take the inward journey to your authentic self? I was worried there for a minute. It's not about the how. You don't have to know how. The poet Rumi says, and you, when will you begin that long journey into yourself? When? Now is a really good time. So I want to tell you a story that some of you have heard before. This is when I was involved in personal growth seminars about 40 years ago, and I was involved in a year-long program, and the instructor told us, called for us to, whenever anybody asked you how you were doing, to say, great. I couldn't get there. Because in those days, if you asked me how I was doing, I was hanging in there. I was getting by. That was the level of how I was responding to life. And so we finally agreed that I could say good. That was a stretch for me. Probably the first couple of weeks that I started saying, when somebody asked me how I'm doing good, I was nauseous. I wanted to throw up. That's how foreign that concept was to me. That was where I started. 6 months later, I was walking through a client's facility and somebody said to me, hey, David, how you doing? And I went, great. I caught myself and went, whoa. There it is, right there. I didn't even force it. It wasn't like an affirmation that I had to say. It's just, this is what was happening. This is my reality. And I realized it was. My life had improved and expanded so much just from being willing to do that little practice of moving from good to great. And I couldn't see it at the start. It was a struggle at the start. But down the road, it was paying off. I invite you to take this journey. I invite you to expand how you view yourself as yourself in the world. So this week, I invite you to do two things. Number one is that contemplate what does this great or grand life look like? And number two, do some mirror work. Look in the mirror and remind yourself of your true self. And like I did, find what resonates for you. Find a level of, if you can't sit there and go, I am grande, I am grand, start with I'm good. Start where you are. Start a little bit above maybe where you are. And say that to yourself in the mirror. And wherever you're aiming for, feel it. Don't just go, I'm good. No, I'm good. I am the goodness itself in form. And your mind may go, and you're going to say, thank you very much for sharing. Now sit down and shut up. Remember, you're uncovering your real self, not forcing yourself to become something or someone you're not. You're uncovering the authentic nature that you already are. And the other thing I invite you to do with this is play. Have fun with it. Don't make it, oh God, I've got to get up and do this morning. No, play. Have fun with it. Life should be fun, yes? Not should be. It is fun if we're open to it. So that's your two practices, contemplate and mirror work. You good for that this week? Yeah. Remind yourself of who you are. So I want to close with a quote from Ernest Holmes, who says, in the divine providence of good, salvation is unnecessary. We don't need to be saved, except from ourselves, right? We don't need some savior. We don't need some outer force, aliens or whatever. He says, salvation is unnecessary, but self-discovery is essential. Because self-discovery is discovering who we really already authentically are, which is fabulous, as Buffy likes to say. He goes on to say, we do not save that which was lost, we merely discover that which needs to be found. We don't save that which was lost. We're not lost. We're just rediscovering that which needs to be found within us. So we have an affirmation. Say this with me. I deeply and playfully explore my inner magnificence. One more time with feeling. I deeply and playfully explore my inner magnificence, and so it is. Thank you.